welcome you to another live edition of the Sports Box, your go-to sports podcast featuring great content, conversation, and your occasional disagreement. Stick around to interact and ask questions. The Sports Box is brought to you by our sponsor, Showcase Sports, located on the White Horse Pike in Hamilton, New Jersey. Showcase Sports for the elite players. Ladies and gentlemen, it's showtime.
How's it going, everybody? We are finally back with another episode of the Sweet Tea Show on the Sports Box, talking all your latest college football news. As always, I'm Noah Dog Deibler with the UGA hat on, of course, and my good buddy and co-host, Garth Charger Patrick, a fan of the very mediocre Florida Gators, sitting at 6-6.
Yeah, but hopefully you noticed what I'm wearing tonight.
Yeah, it's all Duke gear. He's too ashamed to wear any Florida gear anymore. But how you doing tonight, my friend? You ready for this one?
Oh, yeah, man, I'm fired up. It feels like ages, unfortunately, since we've been on here with you guys to discuss college football. Obviously, a lot to talk about tonight. Transfer portal has been absolutely nuts already, and the regular season has just barely ended. Obviously, conference championship games this weekend that we're going to talk plenty about tonight. With major implications on the college football playoff picture. It's crazy the absolute amount of possibilities that we could have after this weekend goes down, Noah.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a lot to talk about. We're going to talk the playoff expansion basically being confirmed now. Coaching carousel moves. Obviously, we have conference championships to talk about. We're also going to talk about the Blake Corum injury, which really sucks for him. But as you guys might notice, we do not have our normal background, which is this. We have this background because we have a very special guest tonight. And Garth, I got to say, man, we've had a lot of great guests, but I'm a little biased in this one. He might just be our best one. He is a UGA fan, and he's also my uncle. He's been in the comments a few times. My Uncle Derek. How are you doing tonight, my friend?
Good, buddy. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. I was so excited to invite you on this about, I'd say, a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, right before the championship games, because we have a lot to talk about. But for you guys who are not aware, Uncle Derek obviously is my uncle, my dad's brother, and he is a big college football nut, man. I'm not even joking. When I wake up, sometimes I wake up in like 5 doctoral dissertation link messages from this guy about college football, about UGA and whatnot. He knows a lot. He's been, well, first of all, just go ahead and ask viewers, how'd you get into college football? How long you've been watching it? And, some of your greatest memories watching it, I guess.
Oh, I started watching college football in high school, and going to date myself a little bit, but that's been over 30 years ago. So I've been a longtime fan for over 30 years. When I was a kid, I went to a lot of Georgia games. Then, of course, I went to UGA in the late 90s. I got to actually go to class with Hines Ward and meet some really cool players and some really nice guys. And being between the hedges at Sanford Stadium, nothing like it, in my opinion. So I watch all teams. Obviously, Georgia's my number one, but I watch college football across the board. It's just got the most passion, I think, of any sport out there.
Yeah, I absolutely agree on the fan atmosphere and whatnot. It's fantastic. I've got a couple comments coming in. I'm here from Andrew at work, but here's some hearts. Thank you very much, Andrew.
Thank you, Andrew.
If you guys are watching yet, please leave a like on the show because it helps spread it through the Facebook algorithm. Get it to more people. Have a good show, boys. This is going to be a great one. I'm really excited for this one. We've got a lot of great topics to talk about as well. We're just going to go ahead and get right into it because we've got a ton to discuss. First, we're going to talk about college football playoff expansion. The last remaining obstacle pretty much to this expansion to 12 teams was the Rose Bowl signing off on it. But last night, it just came out that they have agreed to a potential deal to implement this 12-team playoff starting in the 2024-2025 seasons, which is the last season of the current contract with ESPN, which ends after, I believe it's the 25-26 season. So when this news first broke about 2 months ago, I'd say, we thought, okay, it's probably 2026, but they want to try and do it earlier. But now it's coming out, just after next season. This is coming very soon, an expansion from 4 to 12. I'll start with you on this one, Uncle. What are your main thoughts on this? Because I'm kind of mixed on it as well, and I know you are, but just kind of give us some of your positives, negatives. Who do you think it benefits the most? Who do you think it hurts the most?
Well, good questions. My mixed feelings with this, there's the good and the bad. The good I see is I think more teams across the country will get involved with the playoff. and that means nationwide there'll be more interest. I remember about a year ago watching ESPN, and they were saying the playoffs had become predictable, boring.
Mhm.
It was essentially the same 4 or 5 teams every year: Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, Oklahoma, Georgia. Occasionally you get a Cincinnati or a Washington, but 9 times out of 10, it seemed like it was the same 4 or 5 programs, and the rest of the country is bored. With this expansion, obviously, you can get more teams from other conferences and kind of keep national interest going into the postseason. That's the good, and I think it benefits mostly teams in the Pac-12 and maybe the Big 12, the ACC, who outside of Clemson don't always see a lot of playoff representation.
Mhm.
The bad is I think we're going to see a lot of blowouts. I don't know a nice way to put it. We saw what happened last year between Alabama and Cincinnati and Georgia and Michigan. And once you start getting a number 1 seed against, say, a number 8 or 9 seed, there are always exceptions, but I think we're going to see a lot of blowouts. But you know what? That's part of the game. And I think
Right.
everyone wants a chance to prove themselves on the field. Let them have that chance. And you never know. You might get a Boise State, Oklahoma upset, every now and then. Make it exciting. So that's my 2 cents.
Garth, we have talked about this obviously for, God, at least 5 or 6 different shows at this point. So I already kind of know your opinion on it. But just in case there's anyone watching that doesn't, just kind of give us a recap. What are your thoughts on this expansion, positive, negatives about it, and who do you think benefits or is hurt the most by it?
Yeah, so first and foremost, I was shocked by this one because it kind of came out of left field, out of nowhere. It seemed like the talks for this were kind of not so much dead in the water, but at least on the back burner. Like, hey, we'll come back to this later. We know we're going to do it at some point or another. We just don't know what it's going to look like or when exactly it's going to happen. And then the fact that they jumped straight to 12. I would have liked it personally. Maybe they went straight to 8 next year, and then they said, "Hey, we'll see how this works. If it goes well, everybody seems to like it. We have a good system in place. Then maybe we'll go to 12 the season after, 2 years down the road." So I was shocked, one, that it happened, like I said, out of left field, and 2, that they went straight to the 12-team format. But I do think that there's some good in it. One point that your uncle made that I really like is the more of the broader spectrum national interest, because you're going to have more teams from all over versus mostly just the Southeast, really. Even Clemson, I mean, you can kind of throw them into that Southeastern region. So, it reminds me a lot of another sport that I like in college basketball. Think about March Madness. There's so many people that don't even really follow that sport that tune in, that fill out brackets, that get excited to sit down and watch the games with a bunch of friends. So I think that will really benefit the sport as a whole. And obviously, whenever you have more interest, there's going to be more revenue for the NCAA. So maybe that's a reason why they decided to go this route. But, definitely pros and cons. I'll be interested to see, how it works. And hopefully teams can compete. And it isn't just blowouts. But unfortunately, there probably will be a good bit of shellackings to those teams that kind of just scrape by and make it in.
Yeah, I'm with both of you guys on this one. The main thing, first of all, I'm kind of mixed as well. Now, I wanted an 18 playoff. I thought 4 wasn't enough. Basically, if you have one loss for certain teams, that just means their season's completely over. They can't compete for anything. They're going to be in some meaningless bowl game, blah, blah, blah. With 8 teams, that becomes less an issue because at that point, well, if you lose 2 games, then it's a lot harder to, feel sorry for you, whatnot. But when you can only lose 1 for some teams, you basically have to go undefeated. I'll just say this in general. For people who don't like this playoff expansion, you can thank UCF because this is the reason. They're the main reason that this has expanded. I mean, when they went undefeated that year and didn't make the playoffs, they did all that complaining. Oh, we're the 2017 national champs, blah, blah, blah. They're the reason it has expanded. Cincinnati getting in last year obviously helped. But I think the main argument against playoff expansion that I kind of get is that, hey, sometimes it's hard for us to get even 4 teams. Look at it. The past few years, Alabama has often been clear favorites, or Clemson, Ohio State that won. I think they won it the very first year the college playoff was in. And even when we look at it this year, most people just look at it as Georgia and Michigan as the clear top 2, and then they're not really as sold on TCU and USC. So I think And I'm going to go ahead and put this up here for discussion's sake. But I got the current college football rankings to kind of take a look at what it would be like. And I didn't just do the top 12. I did the top 16 because we always have to consider, well, teams on the outside looking in, because we don't just look at the top 4 as it is now. We consider if some team loses, who goes in. So if you look at the number 12 team now, you're looking at teams like Washington and Utah. Utah has 3 losses. Kansas State as well, 3 lost teams. Teams in this scenario that would be on the outside looking in, hoping for some help. Teams like Florida State and LSU got humiliated last week by A&M. Oregon State even. Obviously, Oregon, who has 3 losses. By the way, they did get killed by UGA on the opening week of the season, and every Oregon fan that watched their show just absolutely disappeared after that. But that's besides the point. I don't know. I personally would have 100% supported 8-team. 12-team, I kind of agree. I think there's going to be a lot of blowouts. That said, the important thing is you give them the chance at least, because they can't complain. Like Uncle says, you could always have a Boise State or an Oklahoma versus Oklahoma type game. It'll throw everything out of whack. At least they have a 0.001% shot, which is way better than it was before when they had 0. So that's kind of where I stand on it. We'll see how it goes. One thing I will say, those teams that, like Uncle Derek said, that complain and, some teams are predictable. Well, you're never going to see Alabama miss the playoffs ever again.
Yeah,
Now that there's 12 teams, I'm just going to say that. But It is what it is. Regardless, moving on to the next topic. We're going to talk about the coaching carousel. We have 4 moves we're going to talk about. We will start with this one because this team is just such a laughing stock. The Auburn Tigers hiring Hugh Freeze to a 6-year deal worth $6.5 million per year. Now, I will give him this. He does have SEC coaching experience. Unfortunately, most of his wins got vacated, but apparently he had a 37-25 or 39-25 record overall, so he did do well. But obviously, what he's more known for at Ole Miss, NCAA violations 21, vacated wins because of violations 27. University phones used to call a escort service 1, but he also did beat Nick Saban twice, which I guess is what Auburn's mostly looking at. I'm very mixed on this one, honestly. I think he's a decent coach. I mean, obviously did great at Liberty where there's a lot less pressure. But was this really the best a program as big and with as much resources that Auburn could get? I don't know. I'll start with you on this one, Garth. What were your thoughts when you saw the Hugh Freeze news?
I didn't see this one coming. A lot of people thought that they would look to somebody that was within the program, potentially even the interim head coach at the moment. But to go with Hugh Freeze, I mean, it's just, can he coach? He's shown it. He's done well at Liberty. He was doing really well at Ole Miss before all the scandals kind of led to a landslide of bad events there. It's just all the extra baggage that comes with this. Hopefully it works out. It seems like he has put it behind him because he's done well at Liberty. He's had some really competitive teams there, even had some bowl games against some more bigger major programs in recent years, and a great quarterback prospect as well. I was this just like the college football playoff announcement. I was shocked by this. I did not see this coming. It looked like actually they were trying really, really hard to get Lane Kiffin there, and that didn't pan out for whatever reason. He wasn't interested. They didn't offer enough money, whatever it be. I think what you guys see happen here is that Lane Kiffin was the guy who they wanted most. And once they knew it wasn't going to happen, they kind of panicked and felt like they had to go and find somebody right away and settled on Hugh Freeze.
Yeah, I definitely think there was a sense of panic as well, because I thought they banked 100% on getting Lane Kiffin. Obviously, comes out later, Lane Kiffin was pretty much just trolling them the entire time, which we'll get to that when we discuss him re-signing with Ole Miss in a minute. But Uncle, we talked about Hugh Freeze, I want to say a week or two ago, long before this was even official, because he was kind of a name that was thrown out there. And now I was kind of joking, about all the messed up stuff that happened while he was there. Obviously, they vacated all those wins from a period of 4 or 5 years, I want to say. But, he's still a respectable coach. It's not like they're hiring some nobody who's never done anything. He has coached in the SEC. He did have a winning record there. But Auburn is just in such a horrific state right now, especially considering, just 5 years ago. I mean, this is the same team that beat UGA in that regular season, was in the SEC championship game, in the playoff midst, that just feels like decades ago now. And obviously, only 12 years ago, they were national champions. So it's just an absolute mess for them right now. But what are your thoughts on, Hugh Freeze to Auburn and what it can do for them? Do you think it's a good hire? Do you think he can help fix them? Or do you think it's just going to be more of the same for them?
That's a tough one. I'll put it this way. I don't think anyone questions Hugh Freeze's coaching ability because he was at Ole Miss. He had a very respectable record at Ole Miss. He had 2 wins against Alabama, Nick Saban, and he's had success at Liberty. So I don't think anyone really questions his coaching ability. It might be his moral character that comes into question when you look at some of the shenanigans he got into at Ole Miss. But I don't think Auburn's overly worried about moral character, to be blunt. Since 2017, if I called them a dumpster fire, that would probably be a compliment. They've just been a disaster. They had that whole drama with Brian Harrison last year where they tried to do a coup and fire the guy after 1 year. And he lawyered up, and obviously it didn't happen. And I'm glad. I think he deserved at least 1 more year, but they pretty much kicked him out as fast as they could. I do agree with Garth. I think Lane Kiffin was their dream. I think that was the golden boy they wanted. But I never thought Lane was going to be realistic because it's really a lateral move. He's had success at Ole Miss. I mean, obviously they haven't won the division, but at least they're a respectable program again.
8 or 9 win team, yeah.
What's that?
8 or 9 win team most years under him.
They're respectable, 8 or 9 win team, but I do think, they're getting gradually better. But for him to leave that and then start all over from scratch at Auburn, I would have been a little surprised if he did that. Not shocked if they offered him enough money, but a little surprised. I was surprised they didn't promote Cadillac Williams, quite frankly. I think he did a very noble job with what he had to work with the remaining part of the season. Players seemed to really love him and respond to him. So I was kind of surprised they didn't go with him internally. But, I think Hugh Freeze has the coaching ability to make them successful. It's his character issues that I think are a big red flag.
Yeah, I agree. And this is the thing. I think the thing with Lane to Auburn is they were really, because like you said, Ole Miss is in a way better state right now than Auburn. That's not even a question, I think. So if they're going after Lane, I think it was mainly they're banking on, they still have that status. They still have that appeal that a coach wants to go there and wants to fix a program like that. The thing they did not account for, Lane Kiffin literally worships Nick Saban. He says that's his best friend. He loves that guy. Do you think he really wanted to go to one of Alabama's biggest rivals to try and go against him, try and beat him, build up a program that could do that? I don't think so. And plus, like you said, Auburn is just an absolute dumpster fire right now. The Brian Harsin thing was always doomed to fail. The boosters hated him from the start. They tried to get him out, like you said, last year. Luckily for them, he got off to a terrible start this year, and they had a horrible record, so they had an excuse to finally dump him. But they wanted him gone forever. That was doomed to fail from the start. It was never working at all. And it's a shame because I thought when he got there, and he actually had a pretty good start last season, I thought he might be, their guy, but it just fell off the rails so unbelievably fast the second half of last year and continued into this year. So, we'll see what Hugh Freeze does. Like you said, he does have the checkered flag off the field, but they just need something new right now to get there on and try and improve their on-the-field product. I do think Cadillac, like you said, was a bit hard done by because he did go 2-2 in their last 4 games. And the only 2 losses, obviously lost to Alabama, who's a very good team, and Mississippi State in OT, who Mississippi State is still, one of the better teams in the West. So for what he was working with, I thought he did a really good job. I did just see 30 minutes before we went live here that he did keep Cadillac on as the associate head coach at least. So that's good because that's a guy.
On his part.
Yeah, because the players obviously love him. He's an alumni, so he loves that program. He knows he's going to do everything in his power to improve him. So I do think that was a good move. But we'll see how it goes. I've got a ton of comments coming in. Our buddy David Dunphy is a big LSU fan. Tigers whooped the Bulldogs 38-27. I don't think they're scoring 38. I don't think so. Mikey Bradley saying I'm late, but Noah's a dork. Mikey is a bigger dork. How about them Cambridge? Garrett saying, how about them Cambridge/Salem Indians, baby? Hopefully the New York State champs after Saturday. Yeah, Garrett, we've had him on the past a few times. Big football nut, mainly high school, it seems like. He's a coach and all that, so we'll see how that goes for him. It's because Lane didn't want to go there. Our good buddy Tom Scavetta coming in saying, what's up, guys? Just signed off to tune into this for a few. What's up, Tom?
That's good, Tom.
Lane Kiffin is the GOAT personality. Yeah, that guy's a character. He is hilarious, honestly. Disagree with it being a lateral move. Auburn has the prestige and the facilities to accommodate Lane more with recruiting. Do you have any response to that?
Not recently. I mean, perhaps when Gene Chizik was there, but then he got fired, 2 years after winning the national championship.
Mm-hmm.
They may have big money donors, but so does everyone else in the SEC. So
it's true.
Vanderbilt. So
yeah, it's always with the SEC. It's like, well, everyone but Vanderbilt. I will say, hey, at least they're number one educationally. So good for them. They have something at least.
I did see this, Mikey. I have the game on in the background.
Yep, so there you go. He did get it. Tom saying, Brian Kelly brings a different ingredient to the table in toughness, but Georgia will be able to fend them off. I agree. LSU might get smoked. I hope so. It just depends on what team shows up, but we're going to get into that much later. We still have more to discuss. Next, we already kind of touched on it, but we'll just go ahead and talk about Lane Kiffin for a few minutes. Agreeing to a 6-year deal to remain with Ole Miss at around $9 million per year with an option for a 7th year. He's been there 3 seasons, obviously including the COVID-shortened year. He has a 23-12 record as it stands. To me, this was a no-brainer. This guy has been very solid for them. They've been a respectable team. Obviously, after that first year, I think they went 5-5. Last 2 years, they've been very good. Been one of the clear top teams in the SEC West. I mean, it's only like 2 or 3 weeks ago. Obviously, they had a couple losses in there. Obviously, the one to Alabama being the biggest. But, it was only 2 or 3 weeks ago, guys. We were talking about, can Ole Miss win the West? They were right there. But they had some key results go against them. I think he's really improved their recruiting. I think the facilities for him are getting better. He's a great player developer, I think. Guys that come out of nowhere like Matt Corral or Dontario Drummond, guys from last year, just killing it offensively. Considering where Ole Miss was a few years ago, basically they were all right, but they were never anything special. They're 6-7 wins most years. Obviously, Freeze had a really solid year in there as well, but then all the other stuff we mentioned, there's a lot of uncertainty. Could Ole Miss, kind of get back to where they were? Winning a lot of games, and now I think they're starting to get there again. So I'll start with you on this one, Uncle. Obviously, you kind of went a little bit in the lane already, but what do you think of this re-signing? You can talk about the money contract if you want, but, more importantly, what Lane Kiffin can bring that program, and this is big for him because I think he won, there's an opportunity here. If Nick Saban retires in the next few years and Lane Kiffin's still there doing his thing, they're still recruiting well, hey, you never know. They could be an SEC West contender at that point.
I think it makes sense for Lane. I think it makes sense for Ole Miss. I mean, he's had success. He's a good offensive-minded coach. He's done good with the transfer portal, getting Dart in from USC and some other players, getting Matt Corral, before that. I think it makes sense. I think he will have Ole Miss competitive. Will they beat Alabama for the SEC West? We'll have to wait and see. I mean, it's not a guarantee, but I think, I don't know who else Ole Miss would go with, quite frankly. I mean, I don't think anyone's going to get Urban Meyer out of retirement unless they offer him.
Hey, you never know with that guy. You never know with that guy, man. He says he retires or has heart problems, and then he comes back a year later.
Yeah, you never know. But outside of that, I can't think of a coach that, would probably do better at Ole Miss. I still think he's kind of in the wait and see mode. He's had some success. They've had winning seasons. They've been ranked. They've been respectable. But they are going to have to eventually beat Bama. And that's just the reality of playing in the SEC West. If he can do that in the next couple of years or so, then I think, we'll say Ole Miss has arrived. If 5 or 6 years go down the road and he hasn't, they may want to look at somebody else. But I think he deserves some more time.
Yeah, no, I think whether it's fair or not, you coach in the SEC West. That's the main thing we said when Brian Kelly got there. Got to beat Alabama, and he was able to do it. He was able to win the West and get to the SEC championship game. It's gonna be the exact same thing for Lane. And if the next few years, I think I have a bit of a grace period. Like if he doesn't beat Alabama in the next 2 years, okay. But if it's year 4 or 5 of the contract and he still hasn't, he's like 0-8 against them at that point or whatever, then yeah, there's gonna be questions raised. I definitely agree. Garth, what are your thoughts on Lane Kiffin? Obviously, he's had a lot of success. I mean, he was first of all, I've loved Lane Kiffin ever since he ditched Tennessee after 1 year. Because I hate that team so much. But he went to USC.
Tell us
He
how
was
you
good.
really don't hold back.
Absolutely. But he was good at USC. Granted, it didn't end well there. He went to FAU a few years ago, and he was really good there. And now obviously Ole Miss, really solid coach with a good background. So, what are your thoughts on Lane Kiffin re-signing?
Yeah, I think it's a good move for Ole Miss for two reasons. One being there's not really anybody out there where if they didn't re-sign him, if he did leave, that you can bring in and say, okay, this is an automatic, definite upgrade from what we've had the past few years. I don't think that Lane has necessarily been, like over the top great at Ole Miss yet, but he's shown potential that, maybe in another year or two, it's there because he has made them respectable. They're being competitive every season, being ranked, really, really good offensive team. One guy that's really stood out to me and will probably win SEC offensive freshman of the year is a guy by the name of Quinshon Judkins. 251 rushing attempts, almost 1,500 yards, 16 touchdowns, 5.9 yards per carry. The kid is absolutely phenomenal. Only a true freshman. He's going to have him there to rely on for another 2 years at least. It looks like he found his quarterback after losing Corral to the draft. So I think this is a year that realistically they could have taken a big step back because of what they did lose to the draft and graduation. But they did enough to be, another respectable year, nothing too crazy. They competed week in, week out. But I think, ultimately that's the pressure being the SEC West. You got to be able to beat Saban, even if it's not an every year thing. So I think that, he's done a respectable, good job there so far. But long term, if that's going to be their guy, he's got to start to, show that he's in true contention for the SEC West, because there's another guy in that conference by the name of Jimbo Fisher that everybody thought was going to be the guy to be able to do that.
God.
Granted, he has beat him there, but he has not competed for the conference at all, not even close this year. Absolute dumpster fire there. People leaving left and right. They already have like 10 starters in the transfer portal, so it's not looking good there. But that's a whole nother tangent. In summary, I think it's good. One other thing I almost forgot that I did want to talk about is I think it's really important for programs. We've seen it. People like Nick Saban, now Kirby Smart at Georgia, Harbaugh at Michigan. It's really important to keep these guys, at least for more than 2 or 3 seasons, because a lot of guys really kind of take it to the next level, take the next step forward. Once they've been there for a few years, they've got their system established in place. They've found their coordinators. That's a big one. I think that Lane could benefit maybe from going after a different defensive coordinator. I think the offense is fantastic. A little bit left to be desired there on the defensive side of things. But, yeah, I think it's good for both parties. And who knows? They could start competing for the West. We'll have to see.
Yeah, and I think the thing you mentioned there, Garth, about retaining players, it's going to be even harder now with NIL and obviously the transfer portal taking off. Because I believe this is, it feels like NIL has been here forever, but I think it's still only the second full season with it. I think it came in right before last season. So, we're still kind of getting used to it and whatnot and how it impacts recruiting. Look, I've always said I'm happy these guys can get paid now. The only thing I don't like is how it's kind of basically become college free agency, if you will. I don't think that's exactly what they intended for it to be. But, hey, if the choice is either that or these guys just getting exploited by their colleges the whole time, not being able to make any money, then, that's just what we're going to have to deal with. But for Lane, obviously he's a great coach, but there are a few things he has to sort out. You can't be up 10-0 and 17-7 against Alabama and lose that game the way they did. They were getting steamrolled in the second half. And you can't lose 3 straight games to end the season when you're in contention for your division and potential playoff spot. Look, Mississippi State's a solid team, but if you want to win the West as a team, you got to beat. Arkansas is having a down year, and they lost to them as well, pretty convincingly by 15 as well. These are things he'll have to sort out in the next few years, so we'll see how he does. But I do want to give him a shout-out. He did it completely string Auburn along the entire way, forced him into a panic hire to show how good his relationship is with Saban. So, guy clearly does not have any love for Auburn. But regardless, moving on to the next hire, Matt Rhule. This was a weird hire. I don't know. Nebraska and their hires. First, they got Scott Frost, who was terrible. Like I've always said, I always thought Josh Heupel was the way better UCF coach than Scott Frost. But I know Scott Frost had an undefeated season, but Heupel still was very productive with, I think, less talented rosters, and the conference was stronger when he was there as well. But, after that dumpster fire with Scott Frost in Nebraska, they decided, hey, you know what? Let's get the guy that wasn't even good enough to last, 2 seasons with the Carolina Panthers. He got fired earlier this year. It was just, let's just say that Matt Rhule in Carolina was an absolute tragedy, to put it lightly. But, this is a guy that has had success in college football before. He was at Baylor the year that they went 10-3. To me, though, the 4 hires we're going to discuss, I think this is probably my least favorite. This is a guy that had a losing record at Baylor, even though he did have that 11-win seasons. The other ones, he was 1-11 and 7-6, so 19-20 overall. And other than that, you're just looking. He was 28-23 at Temple, who it's hard to tell anything of that because Temple plays when he was there. They played in the American, which not it's the best Group 5 conference, but it's still hard to kind of gauge how good a guy's going to be at a big job. And Nebraska's a big job. This is a team that used to be a dynasty, and they want to get there again, and they have every right to, want to get there. I'll start with you on this one, Uncle. I don't know if you're kind of where I'm at, but when I saw this one, I was like, really? That's the best you can do?
I'll be honest. Nothing against Matt Rhule. I'm sure he's a really nice guy. I was kind of underwhelmed. But it may be just who else would go there, quite frankly. Nebraska, as you said, was a powerhouse under Tom Osborne. They won back-to-back national championships in the 90s. But they have really struggled from Bo Pelini to Scott Frost. And they've just not really been – honestly, my recollection, since they moved to the Big Ten, they have actually regressed as a program. Everyone thought, oh man, they're going to challenge Michigan, Ohio State for the Big Ten championship. And they just have not arrived for whatever reason. I don't know if it's a recruiting issue or they just don't have as many bells and whistles to offer folks as far as NIL or what it may be. He did have some success at Baylor, and that's respectable. He did not obviously do well in the NFL at the Carolina Panthers, but of course, Nick Saban didn't exactly tear it up at Miami Dolphins either.
That's true.
So, you can't, NFL, college football, sometimes it's apples and oranges.
That is true. I just want to throw some shots at the Panthers because I can't stand them.
Well, there you go. It's not a hire that blows me away, but I honestly don't see other coaches knocking down the door to go coach at Nebraska either. So it may be mutually beneficial to both parties.
Garth?
Yeah, so, this one, I think they're kind of, if I had to rank this out of a 10, I would give it like a 5 or a 6. Not really so much that I'm not sold on Matt Rhule per se. I'm intrigued, and I don't know how it's going to pan out. Like you guys both mentioned, he's had success at the college level, had a couple of really good seasons there at Baylor in the Big 12. He's an offensive-minded guy, which that's the one thing in this that makes me go, this might actually turn out a little bit better than most people expect, because for me in the Big Ten, Nebraska and Wisconsin, as well as Iowa, are kind of like those 3 teams where every year it seems like they have really good competitive defenses, but the offense is almost non-existent. It's like they just don't want to play that side of the ball at all. So, if he can kind of kickstart that offense, I guess, maybe get some, better recruits in on that side of the football, it might work out. Honestly, I don't know. It's one of those schools that I'm so used to them being middle of the pack, bottom of the barrel in the Big Ten that I'll have to wait and see for them to actually be good before I believe it. But, with what's out there right now, this offseason for coaching hires, much like with Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss, I don't think there was really somebody out there that they could have went after and been like, hey, this is a home run hire. This is the guy that we wanted.
Yeah, that's true as well. Because look, I'll be honest, as the youngest guy here, I have never watched a Nebraska team ever that I've looked at and said, "Man, that's a contender. That's a very good team." The best they got, which is like what Derek said, when they had Bo Pelini, they were pretty solid most years, like 7, 8, 9 wins maybe. But that was about it. They've never been even close to contending as long as I've been alive. Ever since Tom Osborne left, it's just been a continued decline. And look, Scott Frost, maybe he's a nice guy. But Scott Frost in Nebraska was one of the most disastrous things I've ever seen. It was terrible from the start. His record in like one-score games was like 2-20, I swear, or something. It was terrible.
Yeah, really bad.
They blew that game. I mean, look, they blew like a 10-point lead to Northwestern, who's 1-11. Their only win was Nebraska.
Onside kick when you're up by 2 scores.
God, I still can't believe he did that. And that was like 3.5 months ago. But look, good thing for Matt Rhule, it's not going to be hard to do better than Scott Frost did. So he's got very low expectations there. But we'll see how he can do. Speaking of the Big Ten, another team, not only in the same conference, but in the same division, making a big coaching move, which is Wisconsin going for Luke Fickell from the Cincinnati Bearcats, signing him to a 7-year contract estimated to be worth just a little bit under $8 million per year. He was great at Cincinnati. As of now, he has a 57-18 record. Obviously, his biggest success was taking them to college football playoff last season, where they played Alabama, and unfortunately did kind of get steamrolled. But hey, you could argue Alabama steamrolls just about everybody. That's how great they are. This comes right before Cincinnati is going to move conferences next year to the Big 12, so that's a big move for them as well. We'll see who they get in to replace Fickell. But I'll start with you on this one, Uncle. I think this is actually a pretty solid move. I think Luke Fickell's a solid coach. Obviously, it's a big step up in expectations going from the American Conference to a team like Wisconsin that did have a down year. They were 6-6 this year. They fired Paul Chryst early in the season. Jim Leonard, their defense coordinator, came in as the interim and did a pretty good job, had a winning record, but clearly they thought they had to go in a different direction. And with Luke Fickell's out there for the taking, long-term option, 7-year contract. Wisconsin is one of those teams who, like Garth kind of said earlier, they always have really good defense. They pump out offensive linemen, running backs like it's nothing. I still think one main thing they're missing is the most important position. They haven't had that superstar quarterback probably since Russell Wilson left, and that was over 10 years ago now. So, what are your thoughts on this hire, Luke Fickell? I think it's pretty good.
I think it's a good hire, to be honest. He's a very well-respected coach. Like you said, he did very well at Cincinnati over several years. He took them to the college football playoffs, the first group of 5 team ever to make it.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's a good coach. And as far as who is out there and available, yeah, I think he's probably about the best of the bunch that they could have got.
Mm-hmm.
Wisconsin's, an interesting team. As both of you guys have said, they have always got like a good defense. They've always got a good running back. They're always kind of highly ranked at the beginning of the season. Unfortunately, they seem to fall apart, about halfway through. And I agree with you. I think, not since Russell Wilson have they really had a dynamic quarterback or really a consistent passing game. And I think that's what gets them when they play the better teams in the Big Ten, like, Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, what have you. So, but I think it's a solid hire. It's probably going to take him a few years to kind of get his system in place. So I think Wisconsin fans are going to have to be a little patient. They used to say you want to give a new coach at least 4 to 5 years. You want to be fair because they got to get their own recruits in and develop their own program, get their own coordinators in. But I think if he's given a chance, I think he will have success at Wisconsin.
Garth?
Yeah, I think it's a really good hire. I think Luke Fickell's done a tremendous job in his coaching career. made college football playoffs, obviously with Cincinnati, first group of 5. And I watched that game. Their defense played really, really tough. Like they hung around the majority of that game. They got tired a little bit, towards the end, which when the offense struggled as much as it did, that's going to happen. You're on the field for a large amount of time. But I think this is a guy who at Cincinnati, he wasn't really ever known for having flashy, like high-powered offenses. They kind of just managed the game, balanced attack, but the defenses were always really, really stingy, which could be a good thing and a bad thing because, like we just talked about, Nebraska is in desperate need of some offensive firepower, especially from the quarterback position. But as far as like a good fit, I think that this is a really good fit because you bring in a coach who's used to kind of the brand of football that they want to play there, that hard-nosed, tough defense where you kind of suffocate whoever you play. You don't tend to make a lot of mistakes. So I think, in that regards, he's really set up for success. It's just going to be, are they going to give him enough time? Are they going to be patient with him to get his guys in there, develop his system? And can they generate some offense? Because, that's what they need desperately. They've shown that even with bad coaches, bad seasons, they still tend to play really good defense. So, that'll be my biggest what if. Can he get the Wisconsin offense going? And can he get a quarterback in there who's a big-time playmaker?
Yeah, I think the main things I like about Fickell, first of all, he's great at developing players. I mean, what we saw last season, going to college football playoff as a Group 5 team, absolutely ridiculous. Obviously, there'll be a few more now that it's expanding, but for a 14th playoff to get in as a Group 5, that's impressive. And look, I know they got killed by Alabama, but like I said, that happens to a lot of teams. I think they at least kept it close for maybe the first half. They did better than I thought they would. And then Alabama, obviously, the better talent took over. But I did a great job in developing Desmond Ridder, who, unfortunately, is now on the bench for the Falcons. Life comes fast at you, Desmond, going from college football playoff to benched on the Falcons in the span of like 9 months. But,
They
it
do have
happens.
a player on the Jets who's been playing pretty darn good this season, and Sauce
Yep.
Gardner.
Oh, man, I love that guy. Yeah, he was great. So, I like the move. I think, if he's given the funds to succeed, to improve the facility, improve the recruiting and whatnot, he can get it done. I think he's a very good X's and O's coach as well. And obviously the players really respond to him, considering, Cincinnati was not a freaking conference, contender a few years ago. And then all of a sudden they were the favorite last year and they showed it and they were great. They've had a bit of a down year this year. Unfortunately, they did lose to the Tulane Green Wave last weekend. I just had to throw that in there. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Uncle
My
Derek's
medical
medical
matter.
school. Yep. We're going to get to Tulane a little bit later. Before we do, we got a couple comments coming in. I hope y'all are sending these stars I'm sending. Yes, I did. Thank you very much, Garrett, for donating to the show.
Garrett, we appreciate it.
Sent us almost $10. Really appreciate that. The Bills are driving right now, Mikey Bradley says. So, next topic. And this is more of an unfortunate topic that we have to discuss because really like watching this play, but unfortunately it came out today that Blake Corum, who we already knew was injured because he didn't barely played against Ohio State, he had 2 carries for 6 yards, has elected to have knee surgery, which obviously will end his season. He was a big favorite for the Heisman before this happened. He racked up over 1,500 yards from scrimmage this year, 19 total touchdowns. But Michigan, they're going to have to find a way to deal with it. They got a conference championship game this weekend. They want to try it. Honestly, I think even if they somehow lose that, which I don't think they will, but if they did, I think they're already a playoff lock. So, they had the playoffs to deal with as well. So the question becomes, without Blake Corum, what do they do? How does it impact them? Donovan Edwards, who is a good running back, he had 22 carries for 216 yards and I believe 3 touchdowns against Ohio State. He's averaging 7.5 yards per carry this season. So it's not like they're getting some no-name scrub in there. He is a solid, respectable running back. But the question is, can he be that bell cow kind of guy for 2, potentially 3 games for Michigan with how little experience he has? I'll start with you on this one, Garth. Obviously, it's a major injury. Blake Corum's an absolute stud. Came in after Hassan Haskins departed for the NFL, and he lit the world on fire pretty much. Without him, how much do you think this will impact Michigan? Do you think they can kind of not replace the production, but lessen the impact of this injury with Edwards? Or do you think look at this as an injury and go, man, this completely shifts the dynamic of that team. They're going to really struggle moving forward.
Yeah, this is a huge loss, honestly. This is a guy who hasn't really been getting the national spotlight and attention that some of the other Heisman finalist type players have been getting, because that's the type of year that he's been having. Absolutely phenomenal numbers. They've shown graphics. He was having a season, on par with a lot of previous running back Heisman Trophy winners. So this, no doubt, is a huge loss. Like you said, Noah, thankfully the guy behind him, the next man up, is a guy who's experienced. He's kind of shared the workload to a degree this season. So, at least it's a guy who's accustomed to the offense, he's in shape. He's been playing against these tough Big Ten opponents. I don't think that you're going to get the same production out of him as you would Corum, but I think he can do enough to keep them afloat. I think he really just needs to do enough where you have to respect the run game still with Michigan, because I think J.J. McCarthy has really done a good job for this Michigan football team this season. When they've needed to throw, they've been able to. He's looked, a pretty solid quarterback. He hasn't lit the world on fire by any means, but he definitely can sling the football around. Me and Noah both said last year in the garbage time of that college football playoff game that he looked like he had a lot of arm talent and some potential. And obviously he took the starting spot from Cade McNamara. So, they got a lot of trust in him, and they're going to need him to come through, because I think the running game will still be productive. I don't think it will be as good as what it was with Corum, because, obviously it's, you take a Heisman Trophy type caliber player away from any team, and that's going to be huge shoes to fill. But, at least for the Big Ten championship game, I think they'll be fine. It'll really take its toll in the college football playoffs. I don't know if it's going to derail them. I'm not, no knee-jerk reaction here, but definitely something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think it's a big loss, and I do just want to throw this in there. Caleb Williams, guy we never probably would have picked to win the Heisman. Well, a lot of other contenders either got hurt or their teams lost, or whatnot, or have fallen off a cliff pretty much. So hey, he might win the Heisman, which I never would have picked. But it is what it is. What about you on this one, Uncle? Because he's definitely the key piece of their offense. But from what we've seen from Edwards, he looks really good as well. And obviously, Michigan has a very good defense. McCarthy, I'm not 100% on him. I think he's very talented, but I want to see him in more big games. He's still a very young guy. He's looked good this year, but obviously it's kind of tough because Michigan, in the Big Ten, they play a couple solid teams like Penn State and obviously Ohio State, and he's looked pretty good from what I've seen. But I just kind of want to see a bit more of him. What are your thoughts on the state of Michigan right now without Blake Corum?
Well, I think it's a huge loss. Blake Corum was an excellent running back. I definitely think he should have been a top Heisman candidate. And I hate to see anybody get hurt on any team. I think it's going to be hard to replace. I mean, Donovan Edwards looks like a good back. He looks very solid. But he's going to be expected to take up a big workload, much more than he's had at any other time in the season. And I just don't know if Michigan has the depth at running back. If something happens to Edwards, heaven forbid, I think they would be even worse shape. I still think they're going to be a competitive team, but Blake was such a huge part of their offense. It's a big loss. I mean, by comparison, there's kind of good and bad about having one back versus rotating four backs. And at UGA, obviously, they've got four guys, McIntosh, Milton, Edwards, and Brandon Robinson. Honestly, all four of those guys could probably be starters at other schools. But Kirby Smart believes in rotating them and keeping them fresh. There's kind of good and bad. The bad news is none of them really get Heisman-worthy numbers for rushing. But the good news is most of them are usually healthy by the end of the season, the playoffs. And if you go with just one guy like Blake Corum, granted he's a fantastic athlete, and you obviously want to feed the rock to one of your best players. The drawback is, heaven forbid he gets hurt right before the playoffs. You just lost a big percentage of your offense. And Donovan Edwards is a good player, but his workload is about to triple, basically. I don't think it's a problem against Purdue because, Purdue is Purdue. Disrespect, it's a good engineering school, but they're not going to lose to Purdue. I think it might catch up to them, though, in the playoffs. But we will see.
Yeah, I definitely. I think I'm with you both on this one. I think obviously Corum was the workhorse. Edwards has been great from what we've seen, but 92 carries in 12 games. This guy that only averages 7 or 8 carries a game. Take out the Ohio State numbers, it's probably even less than that. So, he's gonna have to. You're talking probably 25 touches, 25 touches. He's gonna have a game. Now that he's the guy. And then past that, we'll see what the other guys can do as well. But I don't think, obviously, it affects him a lot. Blake Corum was a stud. He was the best running back in the country. He was the focal point of their offense. However, I don't think this is, like you said, I don't think this is so bad that it's going to make them lose to Purdue or anything like that. I still think they're a fantastic team. But, once we get the playoffs and you're talking, let's say they play TCU or USC. I now look at it as where I saw Michigan as the clear number 2 team, is if they have an off game, they could lose those teams, and I didn't think that before. I think they have to rely on McCarthy more as well, which this is easily the biggest spotlight McCarthy's going to be in, since when he came in that game against UGA last year, that game was already over. He just wanted to show what he was made of, and credit to him. He played pretty well in that second half, and it helped him get the starting job this year. But now he's the guy. Cade McNamara is transferring. We just saw like 5 minutes before the show went live. He's going to Iowa, so we'll see what he does there. But this is interesting. I think it definitely weakens Michigan, but they're still a very solid team, and teams are still going to have to respect them, I think. Final discussion before we get into our predictions for this weekend. We're just gonna do a brief recap of the college football playoff rankings, because we got all the debate that people are coming out with. I'll go ahead and put them up again, but I think the major things that we want to highlight, first of all, we want to talk about UJ and Michigan as the top 2. Some people I saw saying that Michigan should have been number 1 after how they absolutely dismantled Ohio State. Teams on the outside looking in would kind of want to, focus on what happens if TCU or USC do lose. Who do we think could get in? Who still has a shot? Another thing I want to focus on: Alabama ranked above Tennessee. Garth, I'm going to start with you, but do you have any particular thoughts about these college football playoff rankings? Do you think they got it right, or do you think that there's some things in there you don't really agree with?
Honestly, looking at the list, from me personally, there's not a whole lot of gripe with this. I do think that Georgia deserved to be at number 1 over Michigan, just because I do like the fact that they're in the SEC. Obviously, I think that they have, you could argue that the win over Ohio State was a little bit more impressive than Georgia's best win. But then, you got to look at the fact that they also dismantled a red hot Tennessee offense that was lighting everybody up, and they shut it down for an entire game. So, you could go back and forth in terms of most impressive win. But when you look at, the overall schedule that they've played, I think Georgia's played a tougher schedule than Michigan. So I like the fact that Georgia won, Michigan 2. Obviously, TCU is kind of the given at 3 because they're the last undefeated 12-0 team. 4th is, I guess, maybe where people could start to argue, that 4 through 7 spot. But I like the fact that they did put USC at number 4 because, Ohio State is fresh off a big-time loss, whereas USC seems to really be coming into their own and possibly winning a Pac-12 championship. And then, after that, I'm not really going to go through all those teams one by one. That whole, after you get past the top 4, with it being this close to the end of the season, I don't really get too wound up over that. It is what it is. I know one other thing people did get a little bit mad about or have grievance with is that Alabama was over Tennessee, even though Tennessee did beat them. I get where they're coming from, but at the same time, Alabama's Alabama. They're always going to get, a little bit of bias and love from the CFP committee. So, it is what it is. But yeah, overall, in summary, I think that they got it pretty right here, honestly.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the Alabama-Tennessee thing, because I'm kind of mixed on this. Now, in my opinion, from the criteria I would use, not what the college football playoff uses, I'm okay with having Alabama above Tennessee, even though Tennessee beat them, because, first of all, Tennessee's loss versus South Carolina was embarrassing. How do you give up 63 points to – don't get me wrong, South Carolina's been great this year. I mean, 8 wins for that team and that roster is phenomenal. Shane Beamer's doing a great job. But that loss was embarrassing, whereas they got, I don't care how anyone wants to cope about it, they got dominated by Georgia. The game was not as close as the score shows. Georgia was other than the first 5 minutes where they tried turning it over to make it interesting, they dominated 90% of that game. They're
Offense did
convinced
nothing for Tennessee in that game.
they did nothing. Hendon Hooker was not good at all, and that was a team that was scoring 50 points a game, and we shut
That's
him down.
why they're to be number one, Georgia. I mean,
Yeah,
I agree with Garth. I think if you look at the overall body of work, Georgia's beaten 4 ranked teams. I think Michigan's beaten 2. And if you look what they did with, everyone forgets Tennessee was number 1, undefeated. Hendon Hooker was healthy. They were averaging 49 points a game. And Georgia just dominated them, held them to 13 points.
And one of those, not to interrupt,
a good Oregon team, 49-3, absolutely embarrassed one of the best teams in the Pac-12. And they beat a good Mississippi State team that's ranked. So, and South Carolina, they beat South Carolina 48-6. So Michigan has a very good win over Ohio State. That's very respectable.
Yeah.
But their non-conference schedule was pretty much an embarrassment. And then Penn State, I respect Penn State. James Franklin's a very good coach. But I think they're a little overrated even at 10-2. I mean, Penn State's claim to fame this year is they've lost to Michigan and Ohio State. Other than that, they haven't really beaten anybody that great. They did beat up Auburn. I'll give them that. But Auburn's one of the worst teams in the SEC this year. So, that's not as cold water as it would have been 10 years ago.
And just to add, go ahead.
Oh, and as far, I really don't have a problem with the rankings. I mean, I think technically Tennessee should be above Bama. If you go by the CFP criteria. They have the same record. Tennessee won the head-to-head. Tennessee has beaten more ranked teams. And if you go with comparative outcomes, Alabama lost to LSU. Tennessee absolutely embarrassed LSU.
It was 27. It was like 40-13. Yeah.
So if you go by the CFP criteria, it really should be a no-brainer that Tennessee should be above Alabama. However, if I'm being bluntly honest, I'm not shocked that Bama's ranked above Tennessee because, I think there is such a thing as recency bias. And that loss to South Carolina was a very bad loss for Tennessee. And I think that's just so fresh in the committee's mind that Bama gets the benefit of the doubt right or wrong. If it was up to me, I would have Tennessee over Bama, but I understand why the committee has Bama over Tennessee. And it's also, as Garth said, they're Bama, so they seem to always have a little extra benefit of the doubt.
No, I agree 100%. My thing is, to me, when you talk about, first of all, the 2 losses, Alabama's were on a last-second field goal by Tennessee and a 2-point conversion by LSU, whereas when you look at Tennessee's, they got killed by South Carolina, and then they got dominated by UGA. And by the way, I was trying to say earlier, Derek, that touchdown that Tennessee scored was also in garbage time. It was basically a 27-6 game as well.
4 minutes left in the game.
So the game was pretty much over at that point. So I think by the college football playoffs criteria, however, like you just said, I think Tennessee is ahead by the criteria they use. Whether or not people agree with that criteria or not, I'm just saying by the criteria they supposedly use, I think Tennessee should have been ahead. But like you said, Alabama will get the benefit of the doubt. And look, putting it bluntly, is that benefit of the doubt undeserved or unearned? I mean, these guys win so many titles. So, look, it is what it is. If TCU,
it's hard to say because, obviously Alabama's had a lot more success the last 10, 15 years in Tennessee. But then you get the argument, well, you should be talking about this year's team, not last year's team. So it can kind of go both ways.
That's true.
I think what's kind of ironic to me, and I think I might have mentioned this to you, Noah, privately today, is the committee just isn't very consistent. Because if you remember back in 2018, Georgia had a very good team. They were 11-1. They lost a very, very, very close game in the SEC championship to Bama when they had that unfortunate Justin Fields fake punt fiasco.
Yes.
But I don't think most objective people would argue they weren't one of the 4 best teams. But the committee is like, oh, nope, they have 2 losses, and that's it. There's no such thing as a good loss. Now, fast forward to 2022, it's like, oh, well, Alabama has the 2 best losses. It's like, wait a minute. There was one set of rules for UGA in 2018. Apparently, there's a different set of rules for Bama in 2022.
Yeah,
but we will see.
And I think that's the main thing that people complain about with the committee is they're sometimes inconsistent. Now, I don't think it's happened all. I think for the most part, most of the Final Four they've had has been perfectly fine. But like you said, there's been arguments here and there that they make, and well, it's kind of like these rules that we just mentioned. They kind of just throw them out the window whenever they want. Based on the criteria we just talked about, I think Tennessee should have been ranked higher than Alabama. And look, if TCU and USC win, doesn't matter at all. The top 4 is completely set in stone. But if they lose and, say Ohio State gets in, and if they both lose and Alabama gets in, you're going to have a lot of people getting mad that are Tennessee fans. But to play devil's advocate, I would say if who would you guys think is more of a threat for a championship in the playoffs, Alabama or Tennessee? Because to me, Alabama we've seen can actually do it. Tennessee's a bit more of a wild card in that.
Absolutely, Alabama, and people can't forget either. I know it's probably not part of the criteria by any means, but it's still the fact. No Hendon Hooker for Tennessee, and that's
that's what I was going to get to. If Hendon Hooker was still healthy, it really would be a toss-up. I'd almost lean towards Tennessee, but now that Hendon Hooker obviously is out, then I would see Bryce Young in Alabama, of course.
Yeah, I think that, and look, it is very unfortunate what happened to Hooker. Fantastic player. In my opinion, if he wasn't injured, he should have won the Heisman. But, now he's injured. That's out the window. But, yeah, I definitely agree. I wonder if that played an impact as well. No Hooker, you definitely would rate them lower than you would with him. I don't know for sure. But, as it is, that's the top 4. And if all those teams win, it won't matter. But if one of them or potentially both of them loses, then Ohio State and Alabama, the teams that most people honestly hate, they might have a shot again. So we'll see what happens. But, one last thing before we do move on, I do think UGA number 1 is still correct. Like you said, Derek. First of all, they play in the best conference. And this is the thing with UGA, right? People will move the goalpost. They'll say, oh, Oregon could upset UGA. Tennessee's going to kill UGA. And then once they beat those teams, and then down the line, Oregon has 3 losses, Tennessee loses again. Well, it's like, well, they were overrated the whole time. It didn't matter. They weren't good. And it's like, you picked these teams to beat us when we played them. And then when they lose down the line, you try to discredit us. But they don't do the opposite. They say, oh, well, they blew out South Carolina. They blew them out, by 40-plus points, but South Carolina's not good. Then when South Carolina wins like 6 straight games and finishes 8-4, beats Clemson, by the way, by 1 point, I believe it was. Oh, well, that doesn't matter. The SEC, other than the top 2, isn't good. Like, come on, the haters, man. And look, I love to see them cry. It's hilarious. But you guys, you don't even try to hide it. You just have a bias against us. Like, it is what it is. Look, I've always said, before Corum went out, I was like, I think it's UGA right here, Michigan's kind of like here, and then everybody else is like 800 miles down. I always thought the top 2 was far and away. I thought, I think potentially, and it could still happen, but definitely before we knew Corum was definitely out, I thought it'd be a Georgia versus Michigan rematch in the national championship game, and I think it would be closer than last year, but I'd still expect Georgia to win. Now with no Corum, who knows? But look, I think it's an opportunity for UGA. If they, Michigan is now severely weakened. I thought they were our biggest threat. They got to take advantage of it. But they have one more game before the playoffs to worry about. And as we transition to that, guys, the most important part of the show, we're going to get into our predictions for the conference championship games and our segment we like to call No Huddle Picks. For the standings, which we haven't done picks in a while, I'm still a little bit behind Garth, but still a lot up for grabs. Obviously, whoever loses does a forfeit. I lost last year, so I had to do a friggin' 5-paragraph essay on why I thought Billy Napier could succeed at Florida, which was a disaster.
Oh, that sounds
regardless. Oh, it was terrible. It was absolutely horrific. But anyway, we're going to get right into it. I've kind of sorted these by this is a bit subjective, but I've tried to sort them by what I think is least important to most important games. So we're going to start with the Big Ten Championship. Purdue facing number 2 Michigan at Lucas Oil Stadium. Michigan is a 17-point favorite. 52.0 is the over-under. I'm not going to sugarcoat this. Doesn't matter to me if Michigan has Blake Corum, Donovan Edwards, or even Uncle Derek at running back. They're going to destroy Purdue by 28 points. Purdue has no shot in this game. Garth?
Yeah, this is a really easy one for me to pick. Michigan all the way. They probably win in big fashion. Quite frankly, Purdue is, I wouldn't say they're a bad team, but they're definitely not a great team. And major benefactors of the fact that their side of the division is so weak. And I don't want to discredit them by using the word easy, but it's definitely not hard to make it to this game. We've seen quite a few different faces in recent years, Northwestern, even against Ohio State. This will be one of the easier games that Michigan has played in recent weeks. I think they win big.
Uncle?
I agree. And hey, before med school, I was actually in pretty good shape, so I could have given him a run for the. No, I agree. I think even without Blake Corum, Michigan wins probably by 30. I mean, I think they're just too talented. And Purdue, I mean, no disrespect to them, but I mean, they play in a pretty weak division. I just cannot see them upsetting Michigan.
Yeah, this is the thing with the Big Ten. The 3 best teams are in the same division. Look, I've always said this for weeks. The real Big Ten championship game happened in Columbus last Saturday. Whoever won that game was winning this game. And it's going to be Michigan. I don't even think it's going to be close. Look, this is what happens when you have Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State all in the same division. And this is the main argument people will use why there shouldn't be any divisions in the Big Ten, because the divisions, they're not even close. I mean, look what we saw last year when Michigan played Iowa. It was embarrassing. It was like 45-6. It wasn't even a game. I didn't watch it at all. I knew it was.
Someone from the SEC West won the Big Ten.
God, I'd have to do some research.
Your point. I agree with you. I can't remember the last time someone from the SEC. I said SEC. I meant the Big Ten West.
Yeah.
When's the last time one of them won the actual conference?
Let's see. I'm looking right now. Obviously, Michigan State's also in that division, so that doesn't count. Wisconsin they're in the same. I think they're in the same division.
Wisconsin would be my guess, either them or Iowa. But
my guess is Wisconsin, but it's just my best guess. I definitely couldn't tell you the year or who was on the team.
Coaching them, back then he was a good coach. So it's probably been 20 years.
Here's the thing: when Michigan won their conferences, there were no divisions. So, with how these current divisions have existed, I don't know if any team from that division has ever won it. Like,
that proves your point.
Well, there you go. So, who knows? We'll see what they do there. But regardless, Michigan fans will probably be celebrating a massive win. The next one
could be the first one ever. Now that we've said all this,
that's usually how it goes with us, doesn't it? But all right, ACC champion. Hey, they lost to Appalachian State, so you never know. I guess.
You never know.
ACC championship game, North Carolina versus Clemson, and I do want to say, I think, Uncle, we got to take some blame for this, man. We were talking up Clemson and UNC as potential playoff contenders like 2 weeks ago. And then what happens? North Carolina loses 2 games. Clemson loses to South Carolina, and now they're nowhere even close. For this game, first of all, I think Drake May is an absolute stud. And the fact he's a true freshman is ridiculous. And I'm just saying, Drake, you balled out all year and your team's let you down. There's a team called the Georgia Bulldogs that needs a new starting quarterback next season. They won't let you down. Hey, consider it, man. But team-wise, I think Clemson is much better. I hope North Carolina keeps it close, but I could probably see Clemson winning something by like 14 or 17, something like that. I know they just lost.
Clemson's defense will be the difference.
Yeah.
Despite the disaster they've had at quarterback this year, they still have one of the best defenses in the country with, I think, Brees and some of the other guys they got, Murphy. I think it'll be the defense that'll make the difference. And Drake May is wonderful. He's a fantastic quarterback. But I don't think UNC has the talent around him to really capitalize on that. So, yeah, I agree. I think Clemson probably by 14, 17, somewhere in the ballpark.
Garth?
Yeah, I'm going Clemson as well. I think their defense is too good. They're the defense out of the two that I could actually count on making a stop and, maybe forcing a turnover, gaining some momentum in the game. And then two, on the offensive side of things, DJ, started the year good. He's kind of looking back to the guy that we all questioned last year if he was going to take the next step. But they do have a guy in the backfield by the name of Will Shipley, absolute stud.
Oh my God.
If they can just pound the rock and rely on him, much like they did in a lot of games this season, against a UNC defense that is abysmal, and you're going to chew up clock by doing that. It's just, this is a matchup nightmare for UNC. It's a team that's got a great defense, and it's a team that can really run the ball effectively, chew up clock, keep your offense off of the field. And for UNC, we both you guys mentioned it, Drake May, absolute phenomenal quarterback, monster season by him. Should be a Heisman finalist in my opinion, especially for the fact that not only are the stats there, but he is a true freshman. But outside of him, the team just does not have enough. There's not enough talent around this guy for this to be a competitive game, unfortunately. I've got Clemson probably, I think I agree, probably in the 14 to 17 point range.
Yeah, and I will say, love what Mac is doing there. He's obviously a very experienced coach, very good coach. He's building something there. I just don't think they're quite there yet. I think Clemson, even though they had a down year last year, they're still, I think, the best team in the ACC as of now. But, they're not the invincible, unbeatable team that we thought they were in years past. 2 losses this year, and obviously last year was not good for them. The ACC is getting closer. Teams are actually, obviously Clemson wasn't even in the championship game last year, which was awesome to see as a neutral fan. But I don't think UNC is quite there yet. I think Clemson gets it done. Next game, and this is a massive one. Obviously, I'm going to throw this one to you first, Uncle. UGA going up against LSU. Now, LSU, this game would have had much higher implications and probably been the, game I ranked as second or first most important if LSU still had playoff eligibility on the line. But they had that disaster against A&M last year, so their season playoff-wise is over. However, there's still a lot of pride in this game, and, I saw Kirby speaking about it. He's not having these guys look past this game. He wants to win the SEC. He didn't even do it last year. UGA had, I believe the stat was like they've only won the SEC 3 times in the past 40 years or something ridiculous like that, which now that they have another national title to go along with the other one from the 1981 Sugar Bowl, I believe it was, it's a bit crazy to think they haven't won their conference more, but this means a lot to them pride-wise. Obviously for you at LSU, the big thing is how healthy is Jalen Daniels going to be? Is he going to be 100%? We know he's going to play, but he's still banged up a little bit, which I think could affect him. Look, this is always, and as I throw it to you here, Uncle, it's always been the thing, which UGA is going to show up? Is it going to be the one that dismantled Oregon, dismantled Tennessee, destroyed teams like South Carolina and Vanderbilt, or is it going to be the team that played against Kent State, that almost lost to Missouri, that did that crap in the first half against Mississippi State, Kentucky? You can keep going on. The third quarter against Florida, which, Garth, here, I'll throw you a little bone for your bad team. That was the worst quarter UJ's had all season against Florida. But do you think our team will show up and be firing on all cylinders? Think Stetson can get some of those inconsistent overthrown balls that get intercepted, Darnell Washington drops, fumbles in the running game, stuff like that? And the offensive line, I think, is the biggest one because Harold Perkins, that guy's a monster. They got to keep him contained. But which UGA do you think is going to show up, and do you think we can win this game, obviously?
I do. I'm hoping it's the Oregon Georgia Bulldog team, if you will. And I've kind of felt this way for several weeks. Not to sound cliche, but my honest opinion is the only team that's going to beat the Georgia Bulldogs this season is the Georgia Bulldogs. I've been watching college football, like I said, over 30 years. And I have to say, this is probably the most Jekyll and Hyde team I've ever seen. You look at them against Oregon, Tennessee, South Carolina, Auburn. They almost look unbeatable. They dominate the game from start to finish. And 3 of those 4 games, they scored over 40 points. They held Oregon, one of the best offensive teams in the Pac-12, to 3 points. They shut down Head and Hooker And, the Tennessee offense that was averaging 49 points a game held them to 13 points. And that one touchdown was in the last 4 minutes for Tennessee. Then you look at them against Kent State and Missouri, and the third quarter against Florida and Kentucky, and pretty much the first half against Georgia Tech.
Mm-hmm.
And if I said they looked mediocre, I'd be kind. I mean, it's hard to believe this is the same team.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's a lack of focus or a lack of maturity, or it almost seems like they have to either really respect a team or feel threatened by a team before they decide to play ball, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, what I think will happen in this game is I do think they will take LSU seriously. I do think they will be pumped up and focused for this. Kirby's been very adamant. They have not won the SEC since 2017. It's very hard to do. This is a talented LSU team. Perkins is excellent. They also have BJ Olajari on defense. Very good linebacker. Daniels may or may not be injured with his ankle, but he's, he is a very good quarterback. This is a team they need to take seriously. But I think they do. I think they're motivated. One reason I think they're going to be motivated is they want to do something that last year's team could not. Even though obviously the 21 team won the national championship, they did not win the SEC. And this is one way they can kind of prove that, hey, we're just as worthy as last year's team. So honestly, I think Georgia wins this one probably 38-17, somewhere in that ballpark. I think it will be a decisive victory.
Garth?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of things that both of you guys said. I think that, LSU having beat Alabama definitely adds to the factor of Georgia will take them very seriously. I think that they're going to be a really focused, motivated team for the sake that they do want to win the SEC. Is it a national title game? No, absolutely not. Will they miss playoffs if they lose? No, they won't. But like you guys said, it's not something that they've won like the past 2-3 years straight, where maybe it doesn't mean as much if they had. This game means a lot for them because they want to hang up that SEC championship banner. They want to do something that last year's team wasn't able to quite get done. And like I said, just the fact that LSU has beat Alabama this season, they probably, I know they haven't faced him, but they probably have. Well, actually, I think they did maybe, but they probably have a tremendous amount of respect for Brian Kelly as a head coach. There's just a lot of reasons why they wouldn't really show up as that kind of Jekyll and Hyde Georgia football team, and they're going to be ready to go on all cylinders. I have a lot riding on the line in this game because I've bet several LSU fans that me and Noah know that they'll win. No money involved, just friendly wagers. Maybe a profile picture or something for Facebook is what they wanted to do. So I have a lot riding on this game, but I think that Georgia's going to get it done. I just think that the better of the two teams, the defense is absolutely insane, but the offense, when it's clicking on all cylinders, is really, really good. And I think that, I've said this to multiple times. I think that a lot of people have kind of looked past or overlooked the Georgia offense because they've just come to know them for having this suffocating defense that doesn't allow points. But when the offense has been clicking this year, they put up a lot of yards and they've scored a lot of points. Georgia's been here before. They're the more experienced of the two units. Everything in this game tells me that Georgia's going to win and probably by 2 or 3 scores.
Yeah, I'm with you guys on this one. I think the main reason I'd pick UGA is this is very weird, but they play their competition, which means, they struggle against a lot of teams they shouldn't beat, but their best games have also come against the best teams they played: Oregon, Tennessee, South Carolina. I wouldn't say Florida's a great team, but, they did dominate them, I think, at 3/4 of that game, and it's obviously a big rivalry game, so records go out the window there. LSU is a team they will take seriously. They're not going to take it off. I don't care what anybody says. I know, doesn't matter if they lose by 50, they're in. Doesn't matter. Kirby wants to win every game. He treats the second half of a game against Samford the same as the national championship game. He learned that from Nick Saban, who's the greatest coach of all time. They're not going to take a game off, but they do need to be ready. because this is another one of those games where Stetson throws some dumb interception 10 feet over some guy's head, and LSU scores early, and they take a half to get going. LSU's good enough to beat them, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think they'll come out firing all cylinders. And look, Garth, I know you've been begging me for about 2 months to trash talk LSU fans in preparation for this game. So here it comes, man. You guys are talking about beating UGA. You should have been focusing on beating A&M, the worst team, most disappointing team in the SEC this year, and they took you guys to the woodshed. And you guys are talking about beating us, the defending national champions, back-to-back undefeated regular seasons. 40-something points per game we're scoring, only allowing 10. The only hope you guys have is hoping and praying Stetson Bennett has a bad game and gives you some turnovers. We're going to run you guys into the ground. We're going to have over 200 yards rushing. Stetson Bennett is going to have a great game, and you're going to barely be able to score. UGA 41, LSU 20. You guys are going to get absolutely steamrolled in Atlanta, which means we'll have a fan advantage as well. Look, you guys have done a great job this year, but you're going to see what happens this Saturday when you run into the defending national champions with something to prove. They still got those doubters out there hoping and praying, begging that you guys will win. And they're going to be so disappointed when it doesn't happen. And you know what? I'm going to be laughing at every single one of them when it does. That said, that now means LSU will win, and I'll have to hear it. But you know what? Hey, even if I was humble, they'd still come at me. So, might as well enjoy some trolling while I can. Big 12 championship game. Big implications in the next two games because we're going to be talking about the lower two playoff teams as it stands. TCU taking on Kansas State. A really interesting quarterback matchup here. I never thought I'd say that, but Adrian Martinez and Max Duggan is a very interesting one. Martinez has done very solid for Kansas State. What do you know? He gets away from Scott Frost in Nebraska, and he actually looks like a good quarterback. Who knew? Max Duggan has been very good as well. But a lot on the line. If TCU wins this, if TCU loses, if TCU wins, they're in the playoffs guaranteed. If they lose, they're going to be hoping and praying that the voters will be generous to them with that one loss that they could get in against Ohio State. But I don't think they would. So pretty much I think they need to win. If they lose, I think they're out of the playoffs. And I believe they will win. I think it'll be a close game. Definitely closer than any of the three games that we've already discussed. But I think TCU could win by like 7 or 10 points. But it'll be a very close one. Too much is riding on the line, though, for TCU not show up for this game. I think they'll give it their all. Kansas State is a respectable 9-3 team. They're a top 10 team. They'll give them a fight, but I think there's just way too much on the line for TCU. If they lose this, I think they're out of the playoffs. So I think they'll show up ready to go, and I think they'll win a tight one. What about you, Garth?
Yeah, I'm going with TCU here for a few reasons. I think that, I started to follow them more closely in the second half of the season once they're starting to get the attention for being undefeated, potential playoff run. This is a team that's shown that they can win in a lot of ways. They've had big come-from-behind wins. They've had shootouts, high scoring. They've had low-scoring defensive affair games. They've had to protect the lead late in the game and stop potential game-winning drives. So this is a team that's seen a lot this season. They've won in a lot of different ways. I think that they've got a pretty solid head coach. They've got a really good proven quarterback at this point in the season. And then on the other side of things, Kansas State, yes, very respectable team. I think they'll put up a pretty good fight in this one. They've got a stud at running back. But I think that TCU knows what's on the line. Like you said, Noah, they know that even though they're 12-0 playing for a conference championship, number 3 in the college football playoff rankings, they've got to win this one or else their dream of CFP is most likely over. So I think they're going to come in motivated, focused. They're not going to overlook this team. I like TCU, but I think it'll probably be by like a touchdown, maybe 10 points. It should be a good game that goes all the way.
Uncle.
I agree with what you guys have said. I think TCU wins. I do think it'll be a close game. I'm thinking 7, maybe 10 points. But I think they're the better team. Max Duggan has shown a lot of guts and a lot of heart. They've had a lot of come-from-behind wins and close wins. And I think that's developed a toughness. And I think they realize if they lose, they're not going to get the benefit of the doubt. So if they lose, Ohio State's pretty much in the playoffs. And Kansas State's a respectable program, but They did lose to Tulane. I got to throw that out there.
Yep.
Go Wave. But they're a respectable team, but I think TCU will get it done.
Another team that basically has to win in their end is USC going up against Utah in the Pac-12 championship. USC is 11-1. However, that one loss was against Utah in a 43-42 game on a last-second two-point conversion by Utah. It was ranked number 20 at the time. Since then, they've lost a couple more games to fall down to 9-3. But I will say, Utah's 3 losses at Florida, which, obviously a road game against Florida is always tough. You don't look at the 6-6 record. That's a very tough game. UCLA, who was undefeated well into the season, or one loss well into the season, they've kind of fallen off a bit, but still, upper level Pac-12 team. And then at Oregon, which, look, that's a really tough place to play. Oregon's very good this year, so 2 really solid teams. I think this is really close, but the main reason I would pick USC is it's really tough to beat the same team twice in one season, especially if they're a good team like USC, as this is what we always hear when some team plays Alabama and they actually beat them during the regular season, but then you have to play them in the playoffs. It's like, well, how can you do that twice? I mean, UGA played them last year and they went 1-1. Luckily, the one they won was the more important game. But even then, that's just, it's really tough to beat a team that's very good twice in one season. And USC is going to be a lot more up for this game than, some random regular season game back in October. This is their season. If they lose this, they're going to be playing in some random bowl game they don't care about. Doesn't matter how good it is. It's nothing compared to the playoffs, and that's what they want. And look, Lincoln Riley's done a great job this first season. I thought you'd think, okay, once they move conferences, maybe they'll be competing for playoffs and whatnot. They're done with the Pac-12. By the way, the Pac-12 is screwed once USC and UCLA. That conference is dead. Those teams make up most of the revenue, and it's already the poorest Power 5 conference. We're not even going to be having a Pac-12 championship game 5 years from now, but that's besides the point. But USC is way ahead of schedule. I did not expect them year one under Lincoln Riley to be in playoff contention. But I think they will win this game, and I think they will be in the playoffs. There's way too much riding on the line once again. I think it'll still be a close game like the Big 12 championship, but USC just has so much talent. Lincoln Riley's recruited great there in his first year. Brought over a lot of his coaching staff as well, so they're comfortable. Caleb Williams is an animal. We all knew that. I was hoping he transferred to UGA last season because I thought Stetson would leave. And it didn't work out, unfortunately, but he could potentially win the Heisman. He's a fantastic quarterback. Their offense is high-flying. It's tough to tell with the defense because they play in the Pac-12, which is typically very high scoring. Obviously, in the game they lost to Utah, they gave it 43, so there could be some questions there. But I think they'll just get it done. Something like 42-38, I'm thinking. What about you, Uncle?
I would agree. I think USC is a good team. They've got a lot of talent with Caleb Williams and Addison. Lincoln Riley's a good coach. And I think to your earlier point, it's really hard to beat a good team twice. And I don't see Utah doing it twice in the same season against USC. And I think USC has more to play for. Pretty much win and they're in the playoffs. Lose and they're probably not. So I agree. I think USC will probably win by, I'll say, 10 points.
Garth?
Well, for the first time tonight, guys, we are going to have a different take on the game here.
Finally.
I unintentionally did some research on this by debating with a guy that me and Noah know, saying that the Big Ten was a easy conference to play in and the Pac-12 was a very hard one to play in. So I unintentionally found out today that Utah is actually the only team in the Pac-12 that has a total defensive ranking within the top 25 teams in the country at number 17. But the reason why I'm going to go off on a limb here, probably be wrong, but you know what? I'll accept it if it happens. I'm going to go with Utah on this one because of the fact that I think they're the more physical team of the two in the trenches on the offensive and defensive lines. Really experienced unit. A lot of these guys returned from last season after winning that Pac-12 championship team with hopes of going to college football playoffs. Obviously, that hasn't gone their way. But they've got a really good quarterback in Cam Rising. Doesn't put up the numbers that Caleb Williams does, but he gets the job done. Absolutely phenomenal tight end in Kincaid. Probably, a top 5 tight end in the nation. Defense is really experienced, really physical brand of football on that side. They don't make a lot of mistakes. They make you earn it. And then two, history tends to repeat itself. What did this Utah football team do last year? They beat Oregon in the regular season, played them again in the Pac-12 championship, and beat them there as well. I think it'll be a really good game, though. I think it'll probably be decided in that 7 to 10 point range. Should go right down to the wire, but just a little bit of a gut feeling riding with Utah here. And one last thing, Kyle Whittingham said this week, this Utah football team is really motivated because they've been hearing this whole time that USC has kind of already written their check to the college football playoffs. They're just going to walk out with the W and be on their way. So I think Utah's got a little bit of a chip on their shoulder, guys, to prove something in this game.
Yeah, no, definitely. And look, while we did say it's really tough to beat a hard team twice, Utah did play Oregon last year twice and didn't just beat them both times. They steamrolled them both times. That said, I will say I think this year's USC team is on a whole different level to what Oregon was last year with Riley at the helm recruiting the players he does. There's a lot on the line for both teams, but obviously way more on the line for USC. Their last game was very close as well. It took a 2-point conversion for Utah to beat them. I think it'll be very close, but I think USC will just edge it out, but you never know. I definitely think this is the closest matchup of the championship games. Speaking of the important games, we saved the clearly most important game but for last. It's not even close. The UCF Golden Knights facing the Tulane Green Wave. Tulane is actually a 2-point favorite in this one. It is also a home game. I don't know. I didn't know the American did this, but apparently you get a home game if you have the better record for your championship game. Tulane did beat Cincinnati last week to clinch this spot. UCF is obviously always a top contender in the American Conference. I'll start with you on this one, Uncle. Obviously, this is your medical school alma mater and whatnot. And look, 10-2 for them is incredible because most years they're just either mediocre or most of the time, honestly, they won 2 games.
They're bloody awful most of the time.
Yeah.
I mean, if they win 2 or 3 games a year, that's a good year. Honestly, I remember their last winning season. It was when I was a sophomore there in '98. They went 12-0, and that's when they had Sean King, future Tampa Bay Buccaneer quarterback, as their quarterback. They didn't play a hard schedule, though. I think their toughest game was Louisville. But still, for a academic school like Tulane, that'd be almost like if Emory went, 12-0. So to go 10-2 for them is a big deal. Willie Fritz has done, former Georgia Southern coach, has done a fantastic job. I'm actually quite surprised he hasn't gotten an offer from one of the other schools as far as a coaching position at a bigger school. Maybe he will down the road. Obviously I'm going to root for Tulane. I think it's going to be a close game, though. UCF does have talent. You do have former Auburn coach Gus Malzahn, who's quite the character, but he is a good offensive-minded coach. I think it's going to be close. I'm going to say Tulane by 4. I think they will squeak it out, and I think mainly their defense. Their defense is what has saved their bacon more than once this year, and I think it will do it again.
Garth?
Yeah, I'm going to go. And obviously, for anybody who doesn't already know, I live right here in the heart of UCF territory, although I'm not a fan by any means. I'll be rooting for Tulane in this one very hard. But also I think they can pull it off because UCF, yes, has had a very good season overall. They've shown some high-flying, high-power offense. They're kind of a team that generates a lot of big plays, especially in the passing game. But they've also had a lot of head-scratching games, had a lot of games that have come right down to the final play where either they just barely lose or they just barely scrape by with a win. They lost to, I want to say Navy, could be wrong, one of the military schools. And they literally completed one pass the entire game. So definitely a team that you can run the football against. I think it's going to be a really close game, but I'm going to go with Tulane. They win it by a field goal in this one to edge it out at home. That's a huge thing here, too. It is a home game. These smaller conferences, because I know the Sun Belt does it as well. Get to play home games. So I think that'll be a factor.
This is a very evenly matched game, I think. When these teams played early in the year, it was a 7-point win for UCF. I think both quarterbacks are really good. I think Pratt has been phenomenal this season. 21 touchdowns, only 4 picks. is ridiculously good. John Reese Plumlee, he has the dual threat ability as well. He has 24 total touchdowns, 11 on the ground. Spears for Tulane as well. This guy's just an absolute stud, averaging over 6 yards a carry, 14 touchdowns. It is a very close game, I think. I think both teams are pretty evenly matched offensively. I think Tulane has a bit of an edge defensively, like Derek said. But I'm going to go with the Green Wave in this one, baby. I just cannot do it. I cannot pick against my guy's team when he's on the show, man. I'm picking Tulane to win a close one. It'll be close. I think it's a very even matchup. But I'm picking Tulane to win this one by about, I'd say, like 7. I think it'll be another touchdown possession type of game. UCF is still a really solid team. But
here's something for you to consider. Now, I mentioned it to some of my fellow Florida Gator fans. What if UCF, say, did win this game and they got a bowl game with Florida State and beat them, where back-to-back seasons they beat 2 of the big 3 in bowl games?
Then we'd have to hear about, we're the best team in the state. We should have been national champions again, man. Can't bear that, man. So, hey, look, nothing against the team itself. I respect what they're doing in the American Conference, but some of your fan base, man, like they're nuts. Like they're absolutely crazy. But, it is what it is, man. That's going to do it for our predictions. We only disagreed on one game, and that was Garth going with Utah. So we'll see what happens. Maybe there'll be some major upsets, some big twists thrown.
With my luck, Utah's going to get blown out now that I made that pick.
They're going to lose by 28 now that you picked them. But regardless, that's all we have lined up for the show tonight. Really awesome show. There was a lot of comments early. You guys were killing in the comments. Appreciate that. And a lot of good football talk. But, just want to give a big shout out to my uncle for coming on tonight. Look, I knew he would kill it. It's not a surprise to me. This guy knows so much college football, sending me all the paragraphs that he does. And, hey, I just want to say thank you for coming on, my friend. It was a blast to do, and obviously a lot of good football talk as well.
Yes, thanks for having me, guys. This was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed this. So
most definitely. Thank you for coming on with us tonight. It was a blast.
Anytime. You just let me know.
Absolutely, and like we said, this is like a contract. This isn't going to be a one-off. He's going to be on the show again in the future if he wants to come on. So he's got a lot of stories and whatnot he wants to tell us, and obviously a lot of football to talk about. So he will be on again, that's for sure. But real quick, before we do get off an idea of any last words you want to throw in here, Garth, before we wrap it up?
Just a huge thank you to everybody that tuned in tonight, blowing it up in the comment section. Stars being set from Garrett and our buddy Mike Bradley as well. Huge shout out to Steven Stamkos. He did record 1,000th point of his NHL career. And just hopefully we have a really good weekend of college football championship games. I know probably a good bit of them will be blowouts, but, a part of me hopes that there's some close ones that we get to sit down and it goes right to the wire. But yeah, just huge thank you all around, guys, everybody that tuned in tonight. And hopefully we get really good football this weekend.
Absolutely agreed. From myself, Noah Dog Deibler, my good co-host and buddy, Garth Charger Patrick, and the GOAT uncle, Derek Deibler, this has been another episode of the Sweet Tea Show on the Sports Box. We'll be back next week discussing what happened on championship game weekend and looking forward to the playoffs. But until then, enjoy your sports. Have a good one.
Thanks a lot, guys. Have a good night.
Thank you for watching this episode of Sweet Tea on the Sports Box. Please remember to follow us on all of our social media outlets. On Facebook at Sportsbox Show, Twitter at Sportsbox Show, Instagram at The Sportsbox Show. Find us on YouTube and join Outside the Box, our Facebook sports discussion group. The Sports Box is brought to you by our sponsor, Showcase Sports in Hamilton. Showcase Sports for the elite athlete. And also our friends over at CrowdPlay. Download the free CrowdPlay app today and use promo code THEBOX at sign up for 10 free points. Thank you for joining us.